I don't know, that'd be the prime location.
All right, here we go.
I'm thinking.
I don't have a gavel, so we're gonna open up this October 5th P and Z meeting at 4 o'clock. Can we close the doors back there, guys, please?
Thanks.
First, item on agenda 1A is approval of the meeting minutes from September the 7th. Does anyone have any suggested changes for the minutes? And if not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes as provided.
Motion, have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. All right, they are approved. We're gonna move on to 2A, and this is not a public hearing on 2A, but we do have some speakers signed up to speak. So Drew, you wanna lead us into this?
Maybe. Hey, Martin. Advance the slides for me. There we go. Okay, preliminary plat of Mariposa Weston Place, excuse me, residential subdivision within the city of Kerrville, 8.57 acres. And here's that plat, and I've got a second one that zooms in a little bit more. This is a continuation of the Weston Home Place subdivision, zoned R2 for 47 lots. It is the preliminary plat. I've been working with our engineering department for their conceptual utility design, and they'll continue on with their civil infrastructure design after approval of the preliminary plat. Staff recommends the plat for approval.
Okay,
I'd be pleased to answer any questions before or after our speakers.
just a reminder for everyone, this is a preliminary plat for the subdivision, and, as we are in stage 4 restrictions right now, there are no new water connections being approved at this time. I was informed by Drew that they turned down 3 already this week. So if that's what you want to speak about, then you can rest easy about that. So, I have several speakers. I have Steve Rushton. Is that right? Here. Okay, go ahead, Steve. Step up to the microphone.
Hi, I'm Steve Rushton. I live at 1904 Weston Loop and would like to express my concerns about street safety. Adding 43 homes down the street from me is not what I came to this neighborhood for. The blocking of Wichita and Caddo lanes as dead ends seems unreasonable and unnecessary. Those were built there, and if we were to open those streets up, that would provide exit and interest access to these additional homes rather than funneling all through both drive. That's all I've got to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any comments on that, Drew, before we move on to the next speaker? About the,
I'll comment at the end.
okay. All right, Shelby Presley.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your time. I'm Shelby Presley. I'm at 307 Bow Drive. You know, I'm more here to speak to the Habitat people than y'all. I know if they're following guidelines, it's my understanding that if their guidelines are all met, then y'all really don't have any say. So I want to appreciate y'all's time for that. We were originally given a plat that had an emergency entrance, and Bow Drive didn't go all the way through. There's also other 2 entrances that could be put in. Bow Drive goes to Bow Lane, which goes straight to the elementary school. It's gonna be a big thoroughfare going right through there. So that's one of our concerns. The other part is we've tried to, actually last week we were told we were gonna have a little town hall so we could do a good faith with the Habitat people, and then we never heard from them again. So I would still like for that to happen. Y'all speak in your mission statement that y'all are goodwills of the neighborhoods and want to make better neighborhoods. Well, that's not what's happening here. Okay, nobody's told y'all we didn't want anything to go on there. We've just came up with other solutions, and we would like to have that conversation to say, hey, this is why we can't do it. Instead, it's been more like, well, we're Habitat and this is what we're doing. So I appreciate y'all's time. That's all I got. I know there's a couple of others.
Thank you
y'all.
very much. Chuck?
As well, I'd like to thank you for the time. It's kind of along with what Shelby said, and as it announced, that this project is a continuation of our neighborhood, Weston Place. And we're mostly concerned about how it's going to affect our property values, and it certainly will. And it says, Shelby also mentioned that if you look on the website of the National Habitat for Humanity, they talk about uplifting neighborhoods, revitalizing, rejuvenating. That's not what's going to happen here. Our property values, our ability to sell, which everyone may face that circumstance where they have a change of life, they need to sell their house. That's being severely impaired. Now, we sent a letter, 29 out of 30 homeowners, only one, we don't know, they haven't moved into their house. We all agree. And we've sought to meet and try to work things out with Habitat. But they don't want to do that. They have their own agenda. We're not being considered at all. This is very damaging to us. We would like to do that because we think, now we said that it's not our intention, our desire, we don't have a prayer anyway, that we don't want them not to. We appreciate their mission. But we'd like a solution where it is less damaging to us. There is no question about it. We've had people sell. The realtors don't want to disclose. And people have bought. And that's what's being done. So, I will let others speak, but thank you so much.
Thank you,
Oh,
sir.
one thing.
Yes,
Are
sir.
you- Mr. McMillan,
Yes, sir.
I've seen you before. I know you're on the board of Habitat for Humanity, correct?
Yes, sir, I am.
Are you going to vote?
I am, yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm not,
Doesn't seem real fair to me, but I don't make decisions.
I'm not sure that,
That is not a legal conflict of interest, and as a board member, the board members are required to vote.
so there's no conflict of interest for Tabor being on the Habitat.
No, there's
Board?
not. Correct.
Of course not.
By state statute, it is not a conflict. And as a planning commissioner, you are required to vote for items on the agenda.
Okay. All right, Leanne Fitzpatrick, I guess is.
Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today. My name is Leanne Fitzpatrick. I live at 1920 Weston Loop. Again, what Shelby shared as well as what Chuck shared are also my sentiments. However, I am very, very disappointed because we have not had a seat at the table. And we have asked numerous times. I even met with Mary Capena and Peter Lewis along with Mayor. And we were under the impression we would be meeting before that came to the Planning and Zoning Board, and we did not. And again, what I can say, I came here 14 years ago, and I will tell you, I moved here, and this is my home. And when I moved here 14 years ago to take over the state hospital, within 6 months of moving here, I realized our state hospital was going to be privatized. And I can tell you, this community rallied behind the hospital, and they were by our side every step of the way. and they were nothing but helpful and collaborative and wanted the good as a whole. None of us are saying that we know we need housing, especially I do. We're the third largest employer. We have 864 employees. We need places for people to live. However, there is a difference when you offer an olive branch, you are a good neighbor, you want to hear what we have to say. I moved to Weston Home Place from Comanche Trace. I made a conscious decision to do that, to be closer to my hospital, to be closer to the community. And I never thought that someone would come in and do this and without consulting the people that live in the neighborhood. And that's really all I have to say. I'm very disappointed that we have not had a seat at the table.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Russell Davidson? I think that's what that, Danielson, is it Davidson?
Davidson.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yes, my name is Russell Davidson. I live at 1917 Weston Loop. Been there for about 5 years now. And I just want to bring some concerns of mine specifically about the traffic flow that will most likely result from the connection of Bow Lane. And I think it's a major concern of the current residents, and it probably will be a concern of the new residents in the Habitat for Humanity neighborhood. And I personally believe that if we can address these problems before and in this stage in planning and zoning, that it'll just be better off for the community as a whole. The first thing that I want to bring up is that once Bow Lane and Bow Drive get completed, that's going to become a major crossway between East Main and Singing Wind. The first thing that we need to look at is the current issue or the current entrance to Weston Home Place. It is a split entrance with with an island in the middle, and the entrance to Weston Home Place is directly across from the entrance and exit of the Schreiner University housing. And the exit is kind of offset, or our exit is kind of offset to the right. Now, with how East Main is set up, there is not enough room for, if I am coming from town, making a left-hand turn into the neighborhood, and a Schreiner student is coming the opposite direction, making a left-hand turn into their apartments, there is not enough space for us to both turn at the same time. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't particularly enjoy playing a game of chicken with a college student. It doesn't happen all the time, but as that traffic increases, it's going to happen more often than not. Another thing on East Main is that East Main is a wider street, so when we stop to make that left-hand turn lane, more often than not, the cars behind us don't want to wait, so they have space to go around the right side and pass us, and it's just a matter of time until you get a car that's passing a car turning left on the right, and they're going to be met with a car turning left into Schreiner. I know that's kind of difficult to describe without like a picture, but I hope the description was able to kind of make my point on that. That's going to be a definite concern, especially once traffic increases, because we're talking about 40 some odd houses, creating the throughway to Singing Wind, when right now there's only about 20 houses in the neighborhood. The next thing that I kind of want to bring to attention is, with the housing density that's going to be there, I do think that the intersections within the home place are going to merit some stop signs at Weston Loop and Bow Drive, as well as when the new Weston Loop and Bow Drive connect. Those should be three-way stops and not have a throughway. The last thing, I know my time is coming to an end, that I want to bring up, and I just kind of saw this today, is that the current little tag end of Bow Lane that comes off of, I think it's Piesta Trail or something like that, there are 4 houses off that, and that street is incredibly narrow. Actually, the curbs are painted with fire lanes so that no one can park on the curb. And if that road gets completed, there's going to be a lot of traffic in an extremely narrow road with 4 houses already on there. Sorry, I know I came out of time, but thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anybody here from Habitat Board that wishes to comment before we?
Hi. I'm Mary Campana, the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity, and I do have to say, we are very open to collaborating. We have been listening to feedback. We've had several conversations with homeowners about this process. We wanted to use this site plan and the P and Z process to get the answers before we had the community meeting. Our thought was, it's better to have the answers of what you have and when we all get together. And we're still willing to meet, and there's some other concerns that might be out there that we could make compromises. But we're trying to do everything that we can that's within the code to make those accommodations and build a product that will match and blend into their neighborhood.
Thank you.
So,
Anybody have any questions for Drew or comments before we? I do have a copy of a couple of letters that were sent both to you guys and to us, and understanding this is just a preliminary plat for everyone, that we'll have to come back, and it'll have to be, the inside of this thing and the streets and everything will have to meet the city's requirements and everything. So there's certain things that have to be done the way the city requires it to be done. I had been contacted by someone that questioned the possibility of postponing this and moving this back, so you could have your town hall meeting with all the residents. Pretty sure you have the answers to what you're trying to do. You have a preliminary plat that's been developed, so you know what you're trying to do. And I don't know if that would be to make you guys better neighbors, to be more, make this process go a little bit smoother, because understanding this, once this happens, this still goes through a lot of development processes. Is that something that you guys would consider of?
Chairman,
Yeah.
you cannot continue the plat.
No.
It has to be approved within 30 days of application. So if
Oh, okay.
commission doesn't take action on it, it will be automatically approved.
That answers that question then.
And I can answer a few of the questions that they
Okay, go
asked.
ahead.
The previous preliminary plat did have an emergency-only gate between Bow Lane and Bow Drive. That preliminary plat was approved under the old subdivision code. Since then, we've updated our fire code, and we've updated the subdivision code, and the number of lots within the two neighborhoods combined requires two means of egress. I had another question about Tomahawk connecting. There's a separate parcel between these two parcels, so they would not be able to build that road. And as far as Wichita and Caddo, those were built, the previous plat, those are substandard streets. Those are only a 40-foot right-of-way. So the previous preliminary plat did request to not connect those, and that was honored with this one. Bow Lane and Bow Drive is an adequate right-of-way. It is a narrow pavement section, as one of the gentlemen mentioned. So their engineering will work through that to see if it needs to either be widened or just tapered for now. I've already put a comment into our engineering department as far as what considerations we would need to go through for kind of a three-way stop at those two intersections. Or there's a process to consider other traffic calming devices, speed bumps, and things of that nature. Those would come through the civil engineering design. Those wouldn't be on the preliminary plat anyway. So those are questions to be answered, and we'll work closely with engineering to get those before we go into civil design.
So if this preliminary plat gets approved today, what is the next step for both Habitat and for the neighbors? What is the next step where there's more information, or if there's going to be anything tweaked? Where do we go from here?
They could certainly have a meeting and talk about that. If it's within the context of this preliminary plat, if there are minor changes, they could continue on into their civil infrastructure design with their engineering team, and then eventually final plat before the planning commission. If there's any major changes, the preliminary plat would have to come back to the commission for consideration.
So the next step would be the final plat.
Right. Well, the in-between step would be the infrastructure design.
What you
But
guys
that's
have to
approved
do.
at the
Yes.
engineering level for our engineering department.
Is it permissible for me to speak again?
Yes, sir, this is not a public hearing, so step up.
Well, the option you have is to not approve. And it can be brought up at a later date. Because contrary to what Ms. Campagna said, they have been unwilling to negotiate. And
Chairman,
we,
I understand, but we don't have the option not to approve because
okay,
we don't
okay.
want to.
But as well, the way I read the code, if you had an emergency gate at that entrance, it would still meet the code, no?
because there is an existing street connection, they're required to connect.
Well, there's no entrance on the other side. But, okay. Thank you so much. I do appreciate y'all.
All right, if nobody has any comments or questions or concern, I'll entertain a motion on the preliminary plat for us today.
Make a motion to approve?
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor? Raise your hand. All opposed? So the motion passes. So we'll move on into the public hearing phase. 3A.
Excuse me. 3A is an ordinance to change the zoning from R1A to C2 on lots 1 through 3, Block 25, Westland, more commonly known as 518 and 520 Lois Street. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant.
And what are you turning over then?
Just give an introduction to the project.
George Hager, we have residential construction. We've been in the building, I think I bought the building in 2004. The big lot on the corner. And then a year later, maybe 2 years later, we bought the vacant lot between us and the ARC veterinarian office. So that'll give you an idea of where it is. So we're trying to build, I came in and applied for a building permit to build a storage building on the vacant lot. And basically what we do, we're in the custom home building business. The majority of what we do is outside of Kerr County. It's all over South Texas. We've worked from Port Aransas to Eagle Pass and everywhere in between, Big Bend. And just in the last couple of years with the supply chain, we've had to store more and more things like tile and appliances. And we're looking for a storage facility. So I'm trying to get a permit to build a storage building on this vacant lot. And we ran it through and thought, well, the best way to do it, and because we've got an old slab that we built the metal shed on back there, is apply for the entire, both tracks to become C1 or C2? C2. And that's what we're after. The storage building will look more like a house. This is a very good-looking piece of property. It's an old, built in 1939 rock house with an old red metal roof. We've tried to preserve it. We added on for our plumbing business. We operated a plumbing business out there, Hager Plumbing, for, from about 2008 to about 4 years ago when I sold it. And so we use it as a parking lot. So we want to build a building that, yes, it's a storage building, but we want to make it look like it's like a residential. So I have a garage door in front so we can get pallet jacks in and out. And that's what we do. We store plumbing fixtures in it when we're waiting to finish a house. We've stored windows. Then every now and then we get things we change out. Customers change their mind. They want to get rid of this $500 window and put in a $10,000 window, you know, so we keep, and we end up giving away or selling it or giving it to Habitat. I hate to say that, but that's what we're trying to do, is get the zoning changed so we can build a nice storage building. But that's what it is. It's a storage building. It's not. I did get I applied and I got a sewer tap and a water tap at the back of the building just for future. So what we'll do is probably sleeve in on the back of the building. If that thing ever sells and somebody wants to cut it into 3 buildings or 2 pieces of property, then they can go ahead and run the plumbing and water into the building, cut out the slab and put in a half bath, or whatever we want to do. So that's what we're trying to do. Just make it easier on some of our clients, maybe for storing their products.
Thank you. I do,
Any questions for me?
no, sir, I don't. Does anybody have questions for me?
Okay.
I do not have anyone signed up to speak on this. This is a public hearing.
Do we go through report before or after public hearing?
Well, is there anyone that wishes to speak? Because if they are, let's go ahead and do that now. Go ahead. Yes, ma'am?
Bonnie White, representing 601 Lois. I'm a neighbor to George, and I would agree that his property is absolutely perfect. It's pristine, the lawn is kept, everything about it is perfect. As I handed each of you before the meeting, I own property catty-cornered from him within the circle of reference here, beginning the residential section. And he is indeed contiguous with commercial property to his south or whatever that direction would, but between him and Junction Highway. The absolute only comment I have, and I'm not complaining and I'm not asking for anything, I just want you to consider that if you do change it to C2, in the future, when Mr. Hager is gone and he sells that property, the list that I gave you of accepted businesses for that area that would be a permitted use by right would include even a sexually oriented business. There's a church catty-cornered, and there's residences across from that. I was hoping that there was a way, under the conditional use part of this, that you could somehow restrict some of those uses. It could be a bar, it could be a tattoo, it could be a kennel, it could be a number of things under the land use table.
Another nail salon.
It can be, yes. If you're needing one, I can recommend a good one. We have a number in the area. Again, his property is absolutely pristine and a joy to be around. If there's any way, and I asked Drew earlier in the week, if there was any way we could attach some restrictions for when you get done with this and you want to sell it to me and go somewhere else, is there anything that we could do to restrict some of these uses? Most of the uses under C2 are just fine.
I'll give you right of first refusal.
Okay. Well, it depends on how we go today. I could elect to do one of the more permissible uses. Anyway, that's the only comment I had. Thank you.
Anybody else before we? So I am going to close the public hearing, but it has been pointed out to me, Ms. White, that the next to the last thing on your item there, it's permitted under uses is not permitted in Kerrville.
Oh, it's under the land use table.
No, but I mean, I think that, is that correct?
Change that.
Sorry.
Sexually oriented.
Sexually oriented businesses?
From a zoning perspective, they are permitted in several zoning districts. There are other requirements within the city's code that heavily restrict them. There's separation requirements from residential
Yeah,
property,
this would
schools,
never be
churches.
allowed,
Yeah.
it would never be allowed.
It would not be permissible in this location because of the proximity to several of the surrounding uses. Yeah. So,
I'm assuming probably the bar lounge probably would not be allowed that close to a residential area, but I'm,
the residential's not an issue, but the church or daycare,
Church.
there's probably one pretty close.
okay,
Um,
okay.
Yeah. So as Mr. Hager mentioned, it has been a contractor's office, a general contractor's office for quite some time, using that existing garage. Currently, it is grandfathered as zoned as R1A. Looking through some of the zoning history, it was zoned R1A, rezoned to RT, zoned back to R1A, and I could not find the timeline on that when it went back to R1A from RT. We looked at RT to see if we could figure out how to make the new garage and warehouse work under RT, and it doesn't fit the definitions for the general contractor as an RT office when you have that storage component. So the lowest zoning that we could get to allow the use was C2 with the conditional use permit, which is your next case. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's part of the strategic catalyst area number 4, which is that stretch of Junction Highway from basically the edge of downtown out towards about Thompson Drive for commercial along that Junction Highway corridor. And again, there's no additional traffic impact, no impact on the thoroughfare system, all existing streets and existing commercial around it. The use itself on the property is not going to change, so With that, staff recommends approval, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Anybody have questions, comments? So the reason, is it specifically because it's just going to be a storage building? It doesn't matter what's in it? It's just, it requires C2 to be a storage building?
For the primary use of the two properties as a general contractor, it would require the conditional use permit and the C2 zoning.
So he's operating there right now as a general contractor?
Yes, he's grandfathered in currently,
Okay,
but with the grandfathered use, you cannot expand it.
okay.
So since he's adding the
Gotcha.
new garage, had to go through this process first. I apologize, I didn't go through the zoning. I know you've got it in your packet, but for the public. Again, it is currently zoned to R1A. Across the street is C2, next door is C1 and C2. Across Woodlawn is R1, and then behind the alley is also R1A. And again, it is part of that strategic catalyst area along that Junction Highway corridor.
So this is the process we go through before we get the conditional use permit?
Right.
Any questions? See, question or comments?
I'll just make the comment that, I mean, I know this property and Mr. Hager and, as Ms. White said, I mean, his stuff is immaculate and I know whatever he's gonna build there is gonna be as nice or nicer than anything in the area, so, I think it's good with me.
I agree. I think it's not what he's building, it's what we're looking at. And again, we can't make decisions on what may happen in the future. We have to make decisions based on what's in front of us today, and I understand the concern. But we just, anyway. Yes, sir? I'm sorry, I've closed the public hearing, so I can't, you know. Any other comments, anything? If not, I'll entertain a motion on this zoning change to C2.
I'll move to approve.
Have a motion to approve.
A second.
Have a second. A motion to approve and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes. So now we'll move on to 3B. Drew?
Too far. A resolution to allow a conditional use permit for a building contractor general on lots 1 through 3, block 25, known as 518 and 520 Lois Street. Again, same zoning, amended to C2 if council approves that. And here's the site plan. So the front of the property on the left-hand side, Lois Street. The garage will replace the existing garage in the back of the property. I'll go back to the aerial real quick. You just barely see the existing garage at the back property line. Since we're not changing the zoning, it is consistent with comprehensive plan and zoning policy. Staff recommends approval.
So this is a public hearing. So now I'll open the public hearing at 4:33, and you can speak.
Considering, it seems like I stood up a little too late.
Sir, introduce yourself, who you are.
Rafael Fernandez. I live directly behind the storage facility in question. And honestly, he operates so seamlessly. I didn't know what that was for the longest time until a little bit of the roof started coming up. But then it was dealt with right away. So I don't really have any concerns for the property in the future beyond its ability to then house people again, like at any point in the future, because it sounded pretty set up to go for your plumbing and whatever bath separation were to happen in the future. Could it then house again?
C2 does not allow for single-family residential. There could be a secondary apartment at the back of the, within the business. So we commonly see elsewhere where you have a business up front, a small apartment for the owner in the back. But to be a true single family, it would have to go back to downzone, back to
Yeah,
residential.
it can't be single-family residential.
So we just need something like this all over again?
Can't be
kinda?
multifamily residential. It would have to
Okay.
be, it would have to be downzoned back to R1.
All right, thank you.
You bet. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing at 4:35. The question that Ms. White asked about, is there something we can do in the conditional use permit phase of this to limit the uses? Is that something that we can consider, or is that just,
You can put conditions on the conditional use permit, specific to the approval of the site plan. Oh, wrong way. You can tie it to this site plan for this portion of the property. You can tie it to the existing construction. But if that conditional use permit were to expire, it still defaults to the underlying C2
Right.
zoning. So if there are concerns with this proposal, you can certainly add conditions to help mitigate those concerns. One that commonly comes up is just, screening fence. 6 foot would be the standard screening fence. If for some reason it needed to be taller, you could make a condition such as that.
that would be on the rear of the property between that and the residential property?
That's correct. You could restrict it to this site plan so that if there was any other construction, they'd have to come back to renew the conditional use permit. Again, if it expired, if Mr. Hager closes the business.
It goes to C2.
Yeah, sell it to somebody else and they open just a standard C2 office or whatever the case is. That would expire, those conditions would also go away. Then it would just be C2.
Any comments? I mean, I'm not apt to want to limit it to this particular site plan, because he may want to tweak the building. And it seems to me that the people in the neighborhood are not concerned about what he's going to build and how he's going to build it, but I would like to see some type of screening.
And screening is required.
Some type of what?
A screening fence.
In the
along rear
back
property
between
line.
you and the residential neighborhood.
Well, there's an alley, and we have an old existing rock wall, so can I set it up, fencing codes, can I set it on top of that rock wall, so I don't have to tear down the rock wall?
How tall is the wall?
It's about 4.5 feet.
Yeah, you can put something on top of that.
Yeah.
Okay, I just don't want to tear down that old rock wall.
Absolutely.
Would be sad.
There's an alley between us, so that's a good buffer also.
Yes, sir.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay,
I understand your concerns.
so maybe we'll just add
I
that
mean, I've
to,
got hedges between me and the veterinarian, so.
And landscape, since he has the rock wall, landscaping screening is also an option.
okay,
So he has options within the code that's already required. And that'll be with the building permit.
and again, this is one of those situations where we can't consider what might happen in the future. We have to deal with what's in front of us, so.
Bonnie White's gonna exercise her option.
Not only is she gonna do that, she's gonna keep an eye on you. All right, I'll entertain a motion on this, conditional use permit.
I'll make a motion.
Have a motion to approve the conditional use permit, subject to the additional screening.
I'll second.
Have a second. All in favor, raise your hand. All right. Thank you, guys. So we're gonna move on to wasn't there a time limit on this, Steve?
I tried.
3C.
An ordinance to amend the Planned Development District, PDD 0308, ordinance number 2003-08, on approximately 798 acres out of land generally located northeast of the intersection of State Highway 16 and Interstate I-10. Actually, with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant and give you an introduction.
All right.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Start with yours.
Great. My name's Jim Boyden. I live at 15 South Fairway Drive in Salt Lake City, Utah. I am a partner with B Development Company, and we are interested in acquiring this property and developing it as it's been previously approved by the Kerrville City Council. only 20 years ago or so. Just a little bit of background on me and our group. I'm a land developer by trade. I received my landscape architecture degree from Utah State University in 1998, and then a master's in real estate development from Columbia University in New York in 2004. And I've been doing master plan community development, largely with a golf course component since that time. We've done projects in Arizona, in Utah. We're looking at doing this project here in Kerrville, and look for prime opportunities, throughout the West to develop projects such as this. We think this is a phenomenal opportunity. It's had some issues. As we've looked at it, the zoning ordinance that was written for this property was very stringently crafted, which made doing anything other than what was originally approved difficult to do. As we took a look at the site plan, the original site plan, and Drew, I think if I back up, as we look at this site plan here, it's really well put together. We were attracted to it immediately, but as we did our site visits and looked at the terrain and some of the geography there, we found that there were some inefficiencies in not only the way that things were laid out, but also some things have changed over the course of the last couple of decades in product types and things that the original site plan offered. And we wanted to, without intensifying the density or the uses that were previously approved, we wanted to kind of massage a little bit, move things around a little bit, make a more efficient site plan. And so we had our land planners go to work on that and create some different product types that we think are more representative of what the market is interested in now. We tried to blend the product types so that you didn't have one neighborhood of one lot size, another neighborhood of another lot size. And then also, very importantly, we rerouted the golf course a little bit to avoid cutting into hillsides and creating scarring that would be visible from miles and miles away. This is at a very prominent intersection, as everyone knows. This is the gateway to this community here. And we want this to be something that is a welcome to everyone coming to this area. And the commercial components up at the intersection of Highway 16 and I-10 factor prominently into our vision for this project. We've done some architectural renderings of what we think our commercial corridor could look like in one area of the project. We want to create something that's pedestrian friendly, kind of get the vehicles and the cars off the community and get people out moving around on their feet, interacting with each other. And this is just an artistic rendering of what could be. But you can see, we think that this type of commercial layout has been successful in other areas. I mean, on a much larger scale, something like this in San Antonio has been pretty effective at the Riverwalk. And you could think of this as a very, very much kind of scaled down version of what that would be. But we think it lends to the character of the community. We think it creates an experience that people are really comfortable in. Our purpose for meeting with you today is to discuss the zoning ordinance that was assigned to the original plan. We wouldn't be able to build this version of the plan based on the original zoning ordinance. And the goal in meeting with Drew and staff was to make the changes in the zoning ordinance that would facilitate, what's been drawn here, but also update it to match what's currently, the Kerrville City Code. So we're trying to get in compliance, but also be something that is flexible. So as we build this out, and this could take years, it could take 15, 20 years to achieve build out, that this plan would also be required to meet current code whenever the application is made. So if in the future we do the hotel on parcel 6, there in the middle, that's probably not something we lead out with, like tomorrow if we're approved to build this, right? It would come along later, but whatever codes are on record at the time we make that application is what we're proposing would be, the update to the code today. And so today we're just here to discuss how we might be able to modify the code language so that we could build what we would like to build, which we think is an improvement over the original site plan that was approved, the original zoning ordinance that was approved 20 years ago. Again, we're not increasing the densities.
That
We're
was the
not
question I had. Are
increasing.
you changing the density?
No. We really like what was originally planned. It fits right within the model that we as developers are looking to do. Oftentimes, developers maximize profits by maximizing density. That's not what we do. We want to come in and really respect the nature of the place and do something that is harmonious and respectful and pays homage to what's currently there. We feel like Mother Nature's the best architect out there, and we don't want to ruin that by cramming too much into a space. So we're keeping the density right at what was originally approved. The commercial uses, exactly what was originally approved. All we're doing is maybe relocating some here and there, kind of pushing and tugging a little bit, but keeping the uses exactly what were approved.
Is the commercial density basically the same?
Yes. Yeah. With the exception of maybe a couple acres here and there. There's a component right up here in the back side. I'm going to try to use this pointer, Drew.
That one won't work.
Oh. Back here on the right side at the bottom, there's a 4.5 acre commercial pad that, we think would be a really interesting place to, this is again conceptual, but we think a whiskey distillery would be an interesting amenity in a project called Whiskey Springs.
There you go.
And so we know the attraction that the wineries have, between here and Fredericksburg. Up in Utah, there's a project just north of Park City that is called Blue Sky Ranch, and it is focused around the whiskey distillery process. Tremendously successful. People travel from all over the world to be a part of that distilling process.
Wow.
And we think that we could create something similar to that and really create a destination that's not just here in the hill country, but that people will come from a long ways away to be a part of.
Not really relevant to the situation, but curiosity, is this planned to be a public golf course or a member golf course?
That's a great question. We would like it to be something that everyone in the community can enjoy. We're open for discussion with that as we advance. We want to do something that responds to market demands. We want to do something that people want to come to and be a part of. The last thing we want to do is close the gate and keep people out, right? So we'd like to have those conversations.
Okay. Before I open the public hearing, anybody have any questions for the gentleman? Okay, thank you, sir. So we're going to open this public hearing.
Excuse me, did you say you were opening the floor to questions?
I'm going to open the public hearing now.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You have questions for the developer? Is that what you're?
Yes, sir.
You can ask those
At the
questions
appropriate
during the
time.
public hearing, yes, sir.
Okay, could I ask them questions then?
No.
I'm
We'll
gonna
open the
have-
public hearing.
Okay,
Okay, have you signed up to speak?
yes, sir, I
Okay,
have.
great. So we'll open the public hearing at 4:48, and the first speaker I have here is Steve Clack. How about that?
How about that? Timing is everything.
Fortuitous.
Okay.
You tell us who you are, sir?
My name is Steve Clack. I live at 165 Whiskey Canyon, immediately adjacent to the property under discussion. And with me today are Judge Keith Williams and Zane Presley, also residents of Whiskey Canyon. And I will tell the commission, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be heard today. And I have been authorized by the homeowners associations and all of the residents adjacent to Whiskey Springs, which include Whiskey Canyon, Grotto Springs, and the adjacent ranches of Melissa Holscher and Joe Haynes, to speak on their behalf. It is not our intention to try to overflow the room with people, every one of whom is in serious opposition to this project.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to make one point clear before we start the speaking process. This property has the zoning already. Whether we were to grant the changes they're requesting or not, they have the zoning, they have the right to develop. We all understand right now we're in water restrictions, and so water restrictions and water availability are not a part of what we are doing here. The city is responsible for taking care of that down the road. So if anyone is questioning anything about water, it has no place here. So go ahead.
There were numerous other issues, sir, and maybe you can help me clarify this, because I was hoping that that the owner of the property or one of his representatives would be here today. And is it my understanding that the owner of the property and a representative is not here? This is a proposed buyer of the property that was just speaking? So I'm a little confused, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but as an attorney, I don't understand how someone who doesn't own the property is authorized to come in here and request an amendment. But that's probably above my legal expertise, but.
Can you answer that, Drew?
The owner did submit an affidavit saying that they had the opportunity to apply for the zoning change.
Okay, because there were some issues I wanted to try to clarify from the owner, but he's not here, just for the record, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, and my question to the committee then, is this within the purview of the zoning commission to grant amendments at the request of a non-owner of the property?
Again, I would defer to our planning development services, and if they've brought this to the Planning and Zoning Commission, they feel it is a question that we can deal with.
They are the applicant, and the owner has given permission to them to apply on their behalf.
Okay. Well, this original plan, which I understand was approved more than 20 years ago, and all of us thought died on the vine more than 20 years ago because of numerous problems with it. I guess there's no statute of limitations on how long a tentative plan can remain in effect, but.
This is not a tentative, this is the zoning. What we're talking about is not a tentative plan, this is the zoning.
Okay. Well, to the extent that the proposed amendment does affect us, we have had numerous problems with the owners of the property because they've trespassed into Whiskey Canyon on our primary road. They have trespassed onto the access roads referred to as Whiskey Ridge Trail. And when they were confronted with the fact that they did not have the right to come onto our property or use our roads, they asserted improperly that they thought they had an easement to that property. And to the extent that they've made a representation to the gentleman from Salt Lake City that he may have access to certain of our roads, they have done so erroneously because we've had to kick them off of there before. I was hoping that we could clarify today if they understand under the original plan approved 20 years ago that there's only one access point on this property, and that is off of Highway 16. And they do not have any access to the main road in Whiskey Canyon or Whiskey Ridge Trail, also known as the High Ridge Trail. And that was the question I was going to ask to the gentleman from Salt Lake City. Do you understand that, sir? Can you give me a verbal response?
Do you want me to take?
Yeah, go ahead. It's okay, yeah.
So we understand, and I believe you're referring to this top right corner egress point. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, on Whiskey Ridge Trail.
Okay, that's this?
Yes.
Right there?
Well, I can't see very well from this angle, but the only egress point you have is off of Highway 16, which is just past the Exxon station headed towards Fredericksburg.
And that's the existing entrance point, correct?
That's the only access point. Do you understand that, sir?
That's not an understanding.
Then you have been misrepresented to by the current owners because you understand you do not have the right. The owner does not have the right to access Whiskey Canyon Main Road. Do you understand that, sir?
We're not making that assertion at this time. What I understand is that the site plan that was approved contemplates an emergency egress of what I think you're referring to as Whiskey Canyon Road.
And you have been misinformed, sir, because the previous owners specifically relinquished that right for any use under any circumstances of Whiskey Ridge Trail. That's some of the people we've had to kick off before. And you need to understand that as you contemplate the purchase of this
Certainly.
property, because the legal documents are on file to that effect, sir.
Sir, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, so my point back to the commission is this. They're proposing to put up 368 residences in this area with one ingress and egress point off of Highway 16, which is a massive access problem. And if they're relying on misinformation from the existing owner who has chosen not to be here today, we're going to have a nightmare out there with traffic coming in and out. On top of which, ladies and gentlemen, in 20 years, a lot of things change. And all of the changes tilt against this plan. They have constructed the LCRA towers, which are absolutely contrary to the idea of a first-class golf course that they're going to be talking about. It's hard to hit through a 200-foot tower, numerous of which are located on that particular property. And if they've got a motel, we've got access issues out the ears.
Well, again, you're making points that we're not dealing with, and I understand what you're saying.
I understand, sir.
But talking about golf courses and,
Well,
I think, again, when this thing, this is a preliminary stage of this development of this is gonna require a lot of further approvals through the city.
yes, sir. It's Mr. Siegerman, is that correct?
Yes, sir. And I can tell you, I live in a 1,300-acre golf course development that has one entrance from the
Right.
front in and out.
And Mr. Siegerman, please understand, I mean, I'm pretty passionate, obviously, about protecting the property, but this is an access issue that has been misrepresented by the current owner. And I guess, I know there's time limitations and a lot of other folks, and Judge Williams can pick up and fill in the gaps that I wish I had the time to address, but here's what it sort of comes down to. There's a statute of limitations on everything, up to murder. But to take a plan that's this old, this antiquated, and this fraught with holes, rather than come in here and start making amendments and tweaks and adjustments and adding a motel here or deleting a golf course here, I would respectfully urge this commission to just let this whole thing go. Let them submit a proposed new plan, and let's start from scratch, which is the appropriate way, rather than try to ride the coattails of a plan that was bad 20 years ago and is worse today. The way to do it's not through amendments, especially from someone that's not the owner. And I respectfully request this commission to just start anew. If they've got a plan, let them buy the property, submit a whole new plan so we don't have all of these issues. That's my request. And I realize I've exceeded my 3 minutes,
You're okay, thank you.
but thank you for the opportunity to address these issues.
Yes, sir.
Keith, do you need
Zane Presley, or Pressey.
I think he was before me, if that's okay. Good evening. My name is Keith Williams. I also live
What
down
happened to Zane Presley?
This is Zane Presley.
That's who I called.
I know you did, but I don't think he's going to speak.
You're not,
Are you going to speak?
Okay, I thought we had different orders.
there's no order, it's how I call you.
announce it? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I'm sorry about the
Yes, sir.
confusion. Zane Presley, live at 1392 Whiskey Canyon Ranch Road. So there's just a few points, and I think we've got another speaker who may address some things. But definitely agree. I feel like potentially you guys, even at the commission, have somewhat in a position of disservice here, having to look at something that this plan development that was adopted 20 years ago, which no activity has taken place on. So I'd agree with the substantive points that Mr. Clack has made related to that. And it doesn't seem to me that for a development of 800 acres, which is probably, I would assume, one of the more significant ones that takes place within this community, that has a potential large effect, that onto the previous point, that having just an amendment to go in here after 20 years doesn't really rise to the degree of community involvement or expectation as relates to what's happened here, as many people in the community weren't even here when this was done. So I know that seeing something on an agenda for the P&Z that says an amendment, people might think is something is relatively small, but I think it's something that's being introduced that's, by the nature of the time frame, sort of a new item for many people within the community. Understand the restrictions that you may have. Although I would assume that if you voted against the amendment, then you, in some cases, put more control possibly back within this group to redecide sort of whether this thing fits within the current plans and whether you might want to make proposed changes to the existing PDD that was previously approved by probably a different sitting group of people within the Zoning Commission 20 years ago. I will say I agree with some of the points that the proposed owner made, although I would disagree with the consequences of them. I think that in terms of not changing the density and which a point he was making that he didn't want to blend one neighborhood of one size into a neighborhood of another size. That's actually one of the objections I have about the proposed, specific objections about the proposed amendment that's being made, because the properties that run along the Whiskey Ridge Trail, which are adjacent to the properties owned by people in our community, in the previous plan were 1 acre in size, were 3 acres in size. And the amendment, I believe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, changes them to 1 acre. So they've been cut in size by a third. And in addition, the number of those lots that runs adjacent on the Whiskey Trail that backs up to the properties on our side, the number of those have more than doubled. So the density that matters to our community has been impacted greatly. And in terms of, the statement that you wanted this to fit within the character of the community, I think the community that this is involved with, at least as it relates to the part that backs up to our side, our community is a community of rural-type lots in an 800-acre development where the average size of lots is 45 acres. So people have moved there, set up, for privacy reasons, to have their space, and do other types of activities on the land. And I think that even if you don't want to consider the whole thing, I think the fact that they want to make these lots 1 acre that back right up to our 45-acre lots is something that we would definitely be opposed to more specifically. So I would appreciate your consideration of just the point that you're making the specific amendment, that that you would not approve the amendment based on that point and the impact it has to the aesthetics that we have in our community for those particular lots that run along that road. So,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Now, Mr. Williams, you're up.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
My name's Keith Williams, and I reside at 1126 Whiskey Ridge Trail. I'm neighbors of Mr. Presley and Mr. Clack. I naturally agree with everything that they stated, and we heard what you said, that this is already approved, and you want to limit it to what you're considering here today. But if you would indulge me just a minute, I'm going to save us some time. I don't really need to go back over what I agree with that they said, but I would like to ask Mr. Paxton, since the owner's not here, I wanted to know if you had knowledge of this, Mr. Paxton, but because it is a very bona fide, legitimate concern of this entire community now about our water resources. In my understanding from speaking to someone here, and I think that Mr. Presley spoke with you, or maybe Mr. Clack did, but the entire source of water for the golf course will be from gray water. Is that right?
That is correct. The applicant has agreed, and it is in the draft ordinance that all landscaping will be non-potable water.
And then the remainder of the homes and the commercial development for water uses would be water provided by the city of Kerrville?
That's correct.
My point being, is there any question?
I mean, so the city's really not prepared to talk about the water situation right now because it's not a water question. We have talked to the client a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm Stuart Barron. I'm the Executive Director of Public Works and Engineering. We have talked a little bit to the developer about some options for their water, and we're working through all those things right now. But as a planning issue goes, we're not here to talk about water, but we have talked about reuse water. They are interested in using the city of Kerrville's reuse water. Most of our water on the reuse side has been allocated, but there is some during times that it's not being used that they would be able to use it. And so for that, we're working with the developer. But we haven't ironed out all of those questions yet. So I just want to be real clear and open with the board on that note. So,
thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
Could I make a request in that regard, though? I have some reasons, specifically reasons that raised red flags to me about the water use and the source of that water. And that is, if you're going to address it later, if we could have a similar type notice, that would be on the agenda, being owners of property adjacent. We'd like to know that because it has, I'm not sure what hasn't been, this is one of the problems, something lingering for 20 years, and all of a sudden we have some new people want to buy it conditioned on these changes and everything. But water is huge issue here. The source of that water is huge. Apparently y'all hadn't worked that out even for the gray water completely, much
Just
less the
for
fresh
gray
water.
The service actually, the property is already in the city limits, it's already in our CCN. And for that, for the development that was proposed back 20 years ago, that water is quote unquote accounted for in our water availability study.
Well, more pointed, my question would be, would the intent be to drill new holes, drill new wells on the property itself into the aquifer?
We haven't worked through that yet.
It's not germane to what we're dealing with.
Okay, well, it's sure germane to what he said would be talked about in the future. That's what we'd like to be notified about, so we could address the concerns that have been brought to our attention from.
I would agree with you, and I would say that the thing to do would be to stay in touch with development services as this thing, moves down the road in the next 10 to 15, 20 years. And
Okay, well, as a point of procedure, I would just like to know on something like that is an essential issue in this community and in our own residential community, you're just going to kick the can along, vote on this amendments tonight, and then address the water at some point in the future, and we may or may not know about when it's going to be addressed?
It's not what I want to do, sir. It's what we have a limited scope of what we can make decisions on. This is a planning and zoning commission that makes decisions based on land use and zoning. That's all we do. We are not making water decisions. We're not making design decisions. This is the first step, and we don't have the ability to make a decision based on the possibility of future water or the possibility of where the lots are going to be. This is a conceptual site plan. It's still got to come back, and they can decide where they want to put the lots. So I understand what you're saying, and I certainly understand your concerns, but we are limited.
I got you, and I respect that.
Yes, sir.
I would like to ask Mr. Paxton this, if you're able, if you even know right now, when would the issue of the water sources be raised and under, would it be before the P&Z, or would it be later stages with city council, or just in y'all's planning? What I'm wanting to know is if whatever stage it is and whoever it's before, if we can get notice of that.
Well, the city doesn't have any authority over water wells. That's through the Headwaters
the county.
Groundwater District. Depending upon what they propose for their water infrastructure, that would go through city staff in the engineering department. If there is a development agreement with city council, that would go to city council.
Okay. What time frame are you talking about?
I don't have a time frame. I don't know.
Well, I'm confused. I thought you said that it has already been approved that the city's going to set aside enough fresh water for the residential area as opposed to the gray water. Is it not already part of the plan that water source would be from city resources and not from?
That is correct.
That is correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
But again, the water discussion is not germane to the land use
Correct.
discussion
That's
today.
what I said from the very beginning.
And I understand that, sir.
And I
Thank you.
appreciate everybody's concern, and
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys have lived out there for a long time with 800 acres of undeveloped land next to you, and you had to know somewhere down the road the property was going to be developed. And we've come to that point possibly sometime in the future, so.
Well, and for that very reason, given the longevity of us having lived out there that long and having experienced some of these things, I think that's why it's a totally bona fide issue to address, revisit.
I don't disagree with you. I agree.
Revisiting the current status of it. So thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Before I close public hearing, anybody else?
May I?
Sure.
Didn't want you to get out early tonight. Bruce Strachey, 821 Earl Garrett Street. I want to just broadly push back strongly against the idea that a property that has been zoned in the city needs to be developed within some timeline. That is utterly ridiculous. There are many properties in this city that have developed over time or that are still working to be developed over time. I've certainly been involved in
I live in
some.
one.
Comanche Trace was originally zoned back with the PD back, I want to say 25 years ago. That idea to even suggest that a zoning would go away is counter to anything that the city has to stand up for. And in our capitalist system, where we sell real estate, the sanctity of that zoning, once I have that zoning, that is a tremendous value. So that would be a taking from that property owner. So to even suggest that is ridiculous. This property is also annexed into the city and was in 2003. And in almost every annexation document I have read for the city of Kerrville, the rights to drill wells are given up by the property owner because the city is going to supply the water. And I can tell you in other concepts on this plan in the last 10 years that have been discussed, conversations with the city to de-annex this property have gone nowhere. And I think Mr. Stewart Barron can tell us that that's because this acreage counts to our rights that we get to draw out of the river.
No, sorry. Here we talk about water again. We're really not talking about water. No, the surface acres does not count against our surface water rights at all. If anything, it would help with our groundwater rights, but the groundwater portion of it is not in our groundwater permit as it's written right now.
Got it. So.
There we go. Question, I'll answer.
Understood.
We'll talk about water at another time.
We
I mean, y'all
will,
are here to
we
not-
will. But the city is supplying the water to this. It's
Yes.
in the CCN.
Yes.
Across the street's in the CCN, right? And so it's coming from the city. It's not coming from private wells.
Correct.
So, this property has sat fallow for 25 years. And there's a whole line of developers who've tried to do it. Folks out of Dallas, folks out of Houston. I'm thrilled to hear somebody's coming from Utah because that's where I grew up. And you know what? In Utah, the Beehive State, they're industrious and they get stuff done. And if you look at the management of stormwater and water in the Salt Lake Valley, they thought ahead back in the 1800s. And in fact, every city park and county park in Salt Lake County is built below road grade along a creek. And when they have a flood in Salt Lake County, they close the floodgates and they flood the parks. And in 1983, I lived there and I saw that. And it's happened since then. People from Utah have a way of planning that will blow your minds. We should be welcoming these folks to Kerrville. This is a great place to live.
Thank you. And with that, I will close the public hearing at 5:12. I have some questions. Does anybody else have questions before we move?
Here we go through my report first,
Yeah,
see if I
go
catch
ahead.
them.
Go ahead.
Okay. Again, this is a amendment to the existing PD. As Mr. Boyden mentioned, they wanted to take the previous concept plan, rearrange it basically to their standards. The commercial acreage is within just a few acres. As he mentioned, they added some acreage in the center of the community. They rearranged the lot sizes. Instead of isolating smaller pockets, you can see the various lot sizes blend throughout the project. They did take 70 of the large lots, and they are proposing a multifamily portion. But again, the number of units has not changed. So the density, making sure they honor that density of the original development. As far as the ordinance itself, you do have a copy in your backup, and I'm happy to go through it section by section if you need. Generally, we were trying to modernize the language to match the current code, because also between 2003 and today, we've adopted a new zoning code. So many of the references in the 03 ordinance refer back to the old zoning code, which we can still use. But if this property developed without an amendment, that's the way we would do it. Pull out the old copy, check those standards, and adhere to those standards. But Mr. Boyd and his team wanted to modernize and come up to current standards, so you'll see some references to that. Updated the land use table to the current standards and consistent with their concept plan. Modernized the setbacks and screening requirements. Did reinforce the water-wise landscaping throughout the development. Removed the minimum size for the hotel. It was one of the very stringent requirements. Had a minimum of 233 room hotel and conference center. That may or may not be their goal, but they didn't want to be restricted to having to build something that large, actually looking at probably something smaller than that. And then updated the sign package to reference current sign code, because it's also been rewritten since then. There is, the one exception is the hotel. In the current PD, the hotel is allowed an off-site sign along the Highway 16 frontage, and they wanted to retain that option. Otherwise, the project meets the current sign code. And an additional condition that they bring a sign package back to the Planning Commission for approval, because they're really going to try to combine a lot of their signage to be more of an entryway rather than just standard freestanding signs up and down the highway. So they'll bring that back at a later date. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Guys, any questions for the?
Based on the existing zoning and that it is just amendment, consistency with the comprehensive plan, I skipped over those. Go back. A portion of this is in the catalyst area for Highway 16 and I-10, that intersection, for the commercial portion. And of course, the back portion is agriculture and outdoor tourism, which includes the golf courses, outdoor tourism, open space, and the balance with the neighborhood. So staff recommends the request for your approval.
We'll start with you, Tabor. Any questions?
No.
Ma'am? Guys? So, couple of questions. The original conceptual plan that was approved 20 years ago showing the different lot sizes in the back and the new site plan. So this was a conceptual plan. There was never a guarantee that those lots in the rear were going to be the larger lots, or am I?
Not necessarily, to some degree. They are labeled in different or residential sections. 6BR is that far right-hand side. Sorry, I'm trying to read this little screen as well. Minimum lot size was 300 by 400.
Okay.
So they had put some minimum standards to require larger lots, but the configuration itself was not mandatory.
That's what that was my question. And just from a curiosity standpoint, ingress and egress that they have right now will be the main one and only entrance in and out of the project as we stand?
That'll be a legal discovery. We'll need to look through title work with both the neighborhood and the applicant. Again, this original plan had an emergency access in that corner. As such, they planned for that in this case. We would really dive into that when we get into the plating process and looking at fire code, subdivision code. Do they have access? Are they required access? If they're required access, they'll have to work through and figure where that access is. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the title work and what easements were established, what easements were removed, and so on. So,
is the rear property line the city limits?
Yes.
Along abutting Whiskey Canyon?
That's correct.
That's the city limits.
If I'm not mistaken, this was a petitioned annexation in 2003 for this property, so.
Have any more questions? Understand all of your concerns, appreciate you guys being here. I understand when you live in an area where a big development's coming, no one really likes that. It is part of the property right issues in the state of Texas. There's a lot probably going to have to be done for this to come to fruition, but again, our charge is specifically to make a decision based on what they've requested as a small amendment to the plan, to the PDD. They have not changed the density, they have not changed the commercial density, so that's all we can deal with. That being said, I will entertain a motion on this amended PDD.
I'll make a motion to approve.
So we have a motion to approve. We have a second? We have a second. We have a motion to approve. We have a second. All in favor, raise your hand. All right, this motion passes. Move on to 3D.
3D is an ordinance to change the zoning from R1 to RT on 1.71 acres of land out of the Fosgate Survey number 120, abstract 138, more commonly known as 226 Harper Road. With that, I'll turn it over to the applicant real quick.
Hi, I'm Rodney Bacon. Thank you for giving us a minute today. We want to change the zoning on this house, 226 Harper Road. My brother and our siblings and I own that house, or will own it soon. We'd like to change the zoning from R1 to residential transitional. This is a really big house, 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, on 1.7 acres. We think there are very few families are going to be really interested in a house that size. So we think what we may need to do, if it won't sell, is to be able to rent it. What we'd like to do, we think a better use of the property would be as an office space, such as real estate, insurance, law, or something like that. It's on one of the only 2 corridors between Interstate 10 and Highway 27. We've got Sidney Baker Street, we have Harper Road. We're on Harper Road. This change is long overdue. When this lot was sold to our parents, all the properties in the neighborhood were to be large, estate-sized lots. And that changed next door when they sold the next piece of property. Because going right uphill, we have 1.71 acres. They took the next 3 lots and turned them into 6 homes. So things have changed. 5 houses up Harper Road is a duplex. Next door is 220 Harper, which is an assisted living facility. Obviously commercial. It's been that way for 25 years. And this is a 24/7 operation, not just a business hours type of like what we might want to see in this house. Across Harper Road, there are apartments, have been there for 60 years. Beyond 220 Harper was Key Real Estate. And of course, beyond that, it's all very clearly commercial. Neighbors on both sides have been very supportive. I knocked on doors a couple of weeks ago. Of course, some of them didn't answer. Some talked to me. Most of the questions I got were, well, what do I have to do? And I said, well, you don't really have to do anything. But now's your notice that if you wanted to talk to the zoning people, you can give your input. We got some positive feedback from the neighbors, really strong positive from Sam Braswell. You might know him, local banker, family's been here forever and has property just behind ours, and he told us he thought that was really a good plan to go with. Across Harper Road, we have garden homes. And anyway, we think a business with regular business hours will not be disruptive. There's adequate parking. There's a huge room in that house, like 25 by 33, that might be used for a therapy gym, a studio, some kind of classroom or something like that. And we'd appreciate your help. Be happy to give you all copies of my notes if you'd like to have them.
I think we're good. I don't have any speakers signed up. This is a public hearing. I can open the public hearing at 5:23. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak on this?
No, this is my brother, and I didn't have any resistance.
We received no letters of opposition. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if there is no one else to speak, then I'll close the public hearing at 5:24. Anybody have any questions on this?
Okay. Again, the property is zoned R1. Across Harper Road is R2. The corner lot and the corner 2 lots, it's actually 2 separate parcels. Recently rezoned to RT. There was a real estate office that had moved in. Harper Road is our principal arterial. If these lots were proposed today as single family, they would not be approved.
Correct.
Because they're direct access to the arterial. So RT is a reasonable transition, as the name states, out of residential. It could still be used as single family under RT, or a number of lighter commercial uses that could possibly use that building adequately. Still consistent with the comp plan because the base zoning is residential. And with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions? If there are no questions, I would entertain a motion on the zoning.
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. We have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion to approve and second. All in favor, raise your hand. All right. It is approved. Good luck. We approved it because Bonnie was sitting next to you. All right, staff report.
Next meeting, November 2nd. Have 3 cases already signed up.
Anybody got anything they want to see on a future agenda?
Do we,
All right, me too. We are adjourned.
I was just wondering about time limits. We don't use the timer.
We were.